Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the October meeting of the Beavercreek Board of Zoning Appeals. Ms. Gillo, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Botla,
Yes.
Mr. Clunin,
Yes.
Mr. Estman,
Yes.
Ms. Piddle,
Yes.
Mr. Archibald.
Here. Okay, roll's been called. We have an agenda before us. Do we have any additions or subtractions or edits to the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I move the motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. By voice vote, all in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the agenda has been approved. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from last month.
Yeah.
We actually had two months in a row where we have meetings. Any additions, subtractions, altercations, or alterations and to the minutes from September's meeting?
I would just like to apologize for missing the meeting.
Well, you were missed. And no apology necessary. Anyway, if there are no corrections or changes to the minutes from last month, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
We'll move to approve them.
I second it.
Okay, a motion and a second. By voice vote, all in favor of approving the minutes from September's meeting as written, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes from September's meeting are hereby approved. Okay, we have one public hearing on the agenda for tonight. That is V 24-4, Steve and, is it Tana? Tana, Stuck, 4372 East Patterson Road. Ms. Gillo, you're on.
This is case number V24-4 on an application filed by Steve and Tana Stuck, 4372 East Patterson Road, Beavercreek, Ohio, 45430. Requesting a variance from Chapter 158-105A1, requesting permission for an existing 10-foot fence to remain in the front and side yards and an existing 8-foot fence to remain in the side and rear yards. The applicant is also requesting a variance from Chapter 158-105B to allow for the horizontal structural supporting members of the fence to continue to be on the exterior side of the fence. The property is located on the north side of East Patterson Road, 8 lots west of the intersection of East Patterson Road and Bay Lane, further described as Book 2, Page 7, Parcel 65 on the Greene County Property Tax Atlas.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional input? Or we ask that later. Matt first. Okay, Mr. Funk, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. So what we have tonight is a variance request for 4372 East Patterson Road. As you heard, basically it's East Patterson. It's actually just east of Research Boulevard, and it's highlighted there in the blue is the location of the property. I think I missed a slide. Oh yeah, here we go. Sorry. There's our drive-through. So as you can see there, the fence in the middle, and then this is the Stuck's house here. So the fence is actually on the west side of the property there. So basically, what you see in this, drawing is the Stuck's house is here, and here's the neighbor's house, and this is the fence here. Basically, the front half is, or so, basically front 80 feet, or I guess a third, is 10 feet, and the back 2/3 is 8 feet. And there's another picture of the fence. So basically, how we came to this point is the city received a complaint about an excessively tall fence that was constructed on East Patterson Road. And so basically the code enforcement officer went out and did an investigation. The code enforcement officer actually thought that the fence belonged to the neighbor to the west because the finished side of the fence was facing east. And so he went to the neighbor's house and they said, well, it's not our fence. They weren't necessarily objecting to the fence, but it wasn't their fence. So code enforcement officer, contacted the Stucks. Basically, the fence was constructed without a permit, and our height limit for fences, basically in any zoning district in Beavercreek, except with the exception of industrial, is 6 feet. So in an industrial district, you can have an 8-foot fence for a security fence, but outside of that, basically all fences in the city of Beavercreek are limited to 6 feet. I went back and looked to see what we had as far as records for BZA approving fences above 6 feet. In the 25 years that I went back, I didn't find any where BZA had approved any fences over 6 feet. And so basically when we looked through when I went through our analysis, basically the first one was whether the property in question could yield a reasonable return. Basically, let me back up for a minute. There's actually 2 requests. One request is for the height of the fence. The other request is for the orientation of the fence, because basically a lot of people, the fence basically was constructed backwards with
You
the
mean the
finished side
slats being on the outside rather, or the horizontal members being on the outside rather than the inside?
rather than the inside.
That's
yes.
the second.
That's the second request. So there's actually 2 requests.
Got it.
Variance requests here. So as far as so when we're looking at our analysis, the reasonable return, basically staff felt like basically denial of the variance request would not necessarily prevent a reasonable return to the applicant, by not allowing the excessive height wouldn't cause them to not get a reasonable return on their property.
Do you think it would affect the Airbnb that they have?
We can answer that when we get to the question 6.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just anxious because I missed that.
Yeah, so the applicant purchased the property in 2019, and the neighbor that's in question as far as some of their justification was already existing at that house prior to their purchasing the house. So they purchased the house basically with the neighbor already there. But basically, the staff feels like basically they can still yield a reasonable return for basically both requests. The orientation of the fence, there's nothing they're not diminished. The value of their property is not significantly diminished by the fact that the fence is facing inward instead of outwards, particularly since every other property in Beavercreek and modern fences basically in Beavercreek have to be oriented with the horizontal supports facing the inside of the fence and not the exterior. Whether the variance was substantial, basically staff feels like granting the variance is substantial as far as the height. Basically the additional 33 and basically 67% in height is a pretty significant amount of height. Coupled with the fact that, again, in no zoning district in Beavercreek, except for some industrial applications, do we allow a fence over 6 foot. So not only is it significant, it's unprecedented. And then as far as the reversal of the fence or the second request, again, I guess if it's supposed to be one way and it's flipped completely the other, I guess that's sort of substantial. So whether the character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered, or whether adjoining properties would suffer a significant detriment for the variance. Basically, the action of the city on this was initiated by a complaint. So clearly, there's someone, and we don't know who the complainant was, but someone I would imagine that drives by regularly, lives in the neighborhood, complained about the complaint was actually, literally for the excessive height of the fence. And again, basically the fact that the fence is uncharacteristic basically in any neighborhood in the city of Beavercreek, I would say does alter the character, with the excessive tall fence. And again, the same for the second request. The city of Beavercreek for years has not allowed fences to be constructed with the horizontal supports facing the exterior of the property. So it would, go against the character of the neighborhood and any other neighborhood within the city of Beavercreek. The fourth criteria, whether the variance would adversely affect delivery of governmental services. Actually, for both of those, the city did not see where, either one of those would be, the delivery of governmental services would not be adversely affected for either one of those. Whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restrictions. The applicant purchased property in 2019. I don't know that the applicant's intent was to build a 10-foot fence and an 8-foot fence when they purchased the property back in 2019, but they certainly our zoning and everything's other, our zoning restrictions, our zoning code, everything's available, publicly available online. So they certainly had the ability to research that if they were interested in that. And coupled with the fact that, had they applied for a variance or had they applied for a permit, they would have been notified that, what they're requesting in their permit application wasn't allowable at the time. So the necessity for, or the fact that the 10-foot and 8-foot fence were constructed, they had ample opportunity either through researching the code or even submitting an application. Those, either of those would have, we would have notified the property or, made the property owner aware of the restrictions in height. So that goes for both both requests there. Number 3, whether the property owner's predicament can be feasibly corrected by some other method other than a variance. Some of the property owners, as they'll probably explain, most of their justification was based upon their neighbor. And from our perspective, there's obviously other means to correct some of those things outside of a variance. Whether it's involvement of law enforcement or the fire department or any other other governmental agencies that could some of the feud with ongoing feud that they have with their neighbor could be alleviated by other means and other than building a 10-foot fence. And that goes for both requests, number 1 and number 2. As far as the second request, part of their justification was the fact that their fence was constructed against, I guess, and some of their fence was constructed close to the neighbor's fence. Again, that's not uncommon in Beavercreek. We have many other fences that, maybe somebody builds a privacy fence up against a chain link fence. There's certainly construction methods that allow those horizontal supports to be facing the interior of the property, even in those close construction and close proximity of both those fences. So the fact that the fences are close together, again, we don't see that as justification because there are construction methods where they could actually construct that fence almost up against the neighbor's fence. Lastly, whether the spirit intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice be done by granting the variance. Staff doesn't feel like the spirit intent is being observed at all in the granting of the variance, given the fact that a 6-foot fence is pretty much required in every zoning district. And it would be, again, an unprecedented exception to allow them to build a 10-foot fence, especially when that's not even allowed in pretty much our commercial district, business districts, things like that. So it would certainly be unprecedented, and it would be granting the applicant a special privilege that's not afforded to pretty much any other property owner. And also for the second request, again, BZA has not granted any variances for people to flip their fences. No one's ever, I never necessarily even asked the BZA for that, but that's certainly not a variance that's ever been granted. It's pretty hard to justify not properly, it has to be a pretty unique circumstance to not properly construct the fence with the finished side facing out or the horizontal supports facing inside. So based upon our analysis, basically, staff recommends denial of the variance request because again, we don't necessarily see where there's anything unique about their property that would have prevented them from building a compliant fence. They certainly had the ability to build a compliant fence.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Okay, do we have someone here representing the applicant?
Yes, sir, Steven
Okay.
Stock.
Okay, so up in the upper left-hand corner of the podium, there's thing, if you would read that, please.
I, Stephen A. Stuck, at 4372 East Patterson Road, affirm that the testimony that I am about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge.
Okay?
Okay.
you got?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I got that from him, by the way. This may be a little choppy, but I'm going to do my best. I'm not a public speaker, but... So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Stuck, and this is my wife, Tana Stuck. We live at 4372 East Patterson Road. We are here to respectfully request a hardship variance for our fence for the height, length, and facing direction. We live beside a property that is deemed a junkyard per Beavercreek zoning laws. According to the Beavercreek zoning laws, junkyards or salvage yards defined on the website as, quote, an open area where waste, used or secondhand materials are bought and sold, exchanged, stored, baled, packaged, disassembled, or handled, including but not limited to scrap iron, other metals, paper, rags, rubber tires, and bottles. A junkyard or salvage yard includes automobile wrecking yards and includes any area in a commercial district of more than 200 square feet for storage, keeping, or abandonment of junk, but does not include uses established entirely within enclosed buildings. 2 or more junk and operable vehicles shall be considered a junkyard, end quote. So located beside us at 4384 East Patterson Road, there are at least 12 inoperable vehicles with either no tags or expired tags. One of these has tags dating back to 2016. Along with those inoperable vehicles, there are piles of tires, trash, and miscellaneous machinery scattered throughout the property. So tonight we'd like to discuss how living beside this property has impacted us and our business. The property is not only a junkyard, but is operating 2 unauthorized businesses, Gott V&M and Winsit Motorsports, a muscle car automotive repair shop, and also Buckeye Fabricating and Coating. The car repair has 4 bays. From this garage, we are subjected to loud revving, banging, and welding all hours of the evening. There are tow trucks bringing cars in and out at all hours of the evening. There's cars coming and going, revving, and doing burnouts between the hours of 7 and 2 in the morning. Some of these cars are so loud that they temporarily blow out the speakers of our security cameras that we've had to install because of this behavior. In fact, on September 17th, one of their associates in that car circled up there was doing a burnout, lost control, and ran into a telephone pole across the street and clipped the pole off, and it was quite interesting, to say the least. The other garage is where the coatings are done. This is closest to our property. This garage is where we are subjected to noxious smells of toxic chemicals and caustic paint fumes and the sound of industrial-sized compressors. Both of these businesses start, again, between 7 and 8 and end sometimes around 2 in the morning. There are forklifts moving things around and people yelling while we're trying to relax and enjoy our property and sleep. We've had to modify our lives to accommodate the noise from the neighbor by moving our bedroom to another area of the house where we hear the least amount of noise, and we use sound machines at their highest volume, and even that doesn't mitigate the noise impacts from some of these hot rods. The smell of paint fumes is so strong at times we have to go inside and close our windows, and we've even considered moving from this property. These issues, we've lived there for 5 years. These issues have been escalating within the past 2 years. And so when we first moved in, it wasn't really a problem. It just, as I say, it's starting to escalate. I feel like the occupant is emboldened because of the location where he's at, close to a field and such.
This picture shows, this is about at 10:30 at night, and he's out there welding. He doesn't have the electric supply enough, so sometimes they have to shut down their lights so he can work outside and bang and weld. This went on until 12 in the morning. His girlfriend was out holding a flashlight because they had to shut off the lights so he could weld.
Okay.
And again, this happens like after hours when people are normally, going home and relaxing after a long day's hard day's work. And so they do this then. So several years ago, we converted part of our barn into a bed and breakfast. We go to great lengths to ensure that our guests have a peaceful and pleasant stay. And our bed and breakfast naturally brings revenue to Beavercreek and represents our city in a very positive way. We have a guidebook in our unit that advertises other businesses within the city as well, and a lot of our guests comment in our book how they enjoyed this restaurant or that restaurant within the city limits here. Some of them even have said that they'd love to move to Beavercreek after their stay, which is kind of lovely. Before the fence, because of the decline of the side yard, the offending neighbors had a clear view of our guests and harassed them, verbally and displaying. Our guests are subjected to public urination, foul language, hearing gunshots, and burnouts. Some of the comments we've received from our guests are, one gal was out there by herself, and I don't know whether they were what they were shooting, but she called and asked if they were shooting coyotes, and that she was afraid. That doesn't bode well for anybody in the picture. In June, a tow truck was bringing cars in late at night, and our guest contacted us asking what the beeping noise was from the backup warning. This goes on all night. Or asked if it goes on all night. In the spring, the neighbor kept us up until 1 with cars revving. We had guests that packed up and left 2 days before their stay was up as a result of that. One guest comment sounded like a racetrack outside. The variances, the pointed variances, the extended height of the fence helps us to be a noise barrier for us and our guests, and blocks some of the fumes out from the paint fume and the fires that they burn plastics and caustic material in. It kind of lifts it up over the normal height of a human being, so it does help mitigate that to a large degree, actually. The topography of our yard, where we increased it to 10 foot, the topography is such that there's a dip between our properties. So it's perhaps 4 foot if I read the topographic map properly, but we had to elevate it because a 6-foot fence at that point would still expose their old dilapidated fence that you can kind of see in that image there, and it would still allow them to verbally harass us as well, which we received a lot of. The reason we're requesting a variance on the front setback line is because if we stop the fence at the corner of our yard, the neighbor's dilapidated fence and property could be seen. And as you can see, that is not a very attractive thing for our guests to see when they first pull into our property. So we face the smooth side of the fence towards our property for several reasons, because there is a point where the close proximity to their fence, we simply couldn't physically fit between the two, as Mr. Funk mentioned. But there's also a large overgrowth of poison ivy in between that area, and the neighbor's behavior is concerning to the point where I wasn't comfortable going on his property to put up the fence panels. That's simply put, so he was trying to intimidate us, essentially, yes. So the only property that is affected by our fence, as you've seen on that aerial, is the offending property. Living near a dilapidated property reduces our value by an average of 10%. According to the website Miller Samuels, homes within a tenth of a mile of a registered sex offender can sell for 17.4% less. You can imagine the depreciation of the aforementioned issues in addition to being a junkyard. We believe that having the fence negates some of the depreciation caused by the condition of our neighbor's property, not only for us, but our other neighbors as well. We have submitted letters from 3 of our neighbors that have written in full support of the fence. 2 of these neighbors have joined us this evening. We're so grateful. And they've also said they feel safer for having the fence up, and several have commented that it improves the look of the neighborhood. Some of them are here. So in conclusion, we are very concerned about depreciation and the value of our property if we have to conform to the code of the fence set forth by the city. We have tried multiple measures to mitigate the noise, views, and odors from the junkyard next door. We've asked the neighbor to be respectful and clean up their property, but to no avail. We spent thousands of dollars on green giant arborvitaes that didn't grow fast enough. We've contacted zoning several times. We've contacted the police at least once a week. We've contacted the sheriff's department. And finally, we have contacted an attorney. We came to the conclusion that the fence was the quickest and most effective solution. Again, the offending neighbor's property is the only one that is affected by this fence. We have put a lot of time, effort, and money into improving our property, and we feel that the fence has greatly enhanced the look of it and the feel of it. We leave you with this. By law, one of our bundles of rights that go with owning a property includes the right to peaceful enjoyment. Being beside an unauthorized junkyard with 2 other businesses has robbed us of the peaceful enjoyment of our property. That is our right to have. By being allowed the variances on our fence for the first time since owning our property, we are able to get more peace and quiet. The fence helps protect some of the value of not only our property, but our neighbor's property as well. Thank you for your time and your consideration and your patience for watching me stumble through.
You did fine, and thank you very much, and I'm sure we will have questions when we get to the discussion of the
Yes, sir.
board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to do? Yeah, do we have any written and public input, Ms. Gillow?
We did receive 4 emails, 3 that the applicant had already mentioned, and then we did receive another one. Each Board of Zoning Appeals member did receive a copy of those.
Right, okay. And those have been included in the file? Okay. All right, since this is a public hearing, we will open up the public hearing portion of this meeting, and if anyone out in the audience would like to speak in favor of these variance requests, or oppose these variance requests, please come up to the podium, read the little card in the upper left-hand corner of the podium, and state your case.
My name is Jeffrey Fife. I live at 4284 East Patterson Road. I affirm that the testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
I, of course, wrote a letter to the board
Right.
in support of this variance being granted for this fence. I know that in my drive in and out of the neighborhood, when I'm driving out of the neighborhood, the fence hides the junkyard, and I don't have to look at it. It makes the neighborhood much more appealing. The drive-in, I wish there were a fence blocking the junkyard from the view on the drive-in. I'm sure that that does not give a very good impression to people entering Beavercreek on Patterson Road. So since it seems to be futile to contact the police, the zoning department, the sheriff's department, this appears to be the best option available to take care of this issue at this time. So I would ask that the board here give careful consideration to granting this variance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fife. Aye.
Hello, I am Sarah Clark at 4362 East Patterson Road, Beavercreek, Ohio. Affirm that the testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge. I was one of the letter writers, and we are on directly the other side of the Stucks. I feel like I'm going to cry. Also, I was not prepared to speak. When Brian Winsett moved in to our neighborhood, I can't tell you just that sinking feeling I got when I got the postcard in the mail about the house we just moved into, essentially. Excited to live in Beavercreek, in the nice neighborhood, close to my in-laws, down the street from where my husband grew up. And then we get the sex offender notice in the mail. And so at that time, we only had 2 children. I was scared out of my mind. I was furious. I was scared because I did my due diligence. I looked up all the stats in the area just to make sure that we were moving into a nice part of town. And there was nothing I could do about it. And at that point, the previous owners of the Stucks home, they kind of kept to themselves. That was fine. And then when we saw that somebody else bought the house, I was, oh my gosh, now who's going to move in? But they are wonderful people. When we started getting to know them, I was so grateful for them to move in, and just the wonderful things that they've done to their home and their property, and just the people that they are. They made up for that. They made me want to stick around. And honestly, they've been through so much. We hear the noises and we get those smells too, but not to the extent that they do. We've made our own phone calls about the noise. My husband, Ryan, has been over there a few times to tell him to knock it off, and nothing has ever happened. So honestly, when they put up this fence, to me, which we can see, Brian can see into our yard without the fence. I've got 2 young girls. I've got a 14-year-old boy too. But it's my girls that I worry about. And this fence does nothing but good, in my opinion. And I wrote that in my letter, but I feel like I need to speak out on the record here too, that this is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. And I get that there's no precedence for this, but this is not, I feel like, a common situation to be in such a city like Beavercreek. It's a wonderful place to live. And it's true, when you're coming down East Patterson, that is the first place that you see on that road. That is the first entrance into Beavercreek. And it's just a stark contrast next to the Stucks home, because it's so beautiful and it's so well done, and it has this just wonderful feel about it. Anyway, we're the only other people who can see the fence, from our yard. And I'm grateful for it as a mom of 3 kids, personally. So I just want to speak that piece, and I'll conclude here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Clark.
Hi, I'm
Welcome.
Lucy Fife. I live at 4284 East Patterson Road, and I affirm that the testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge. I wrote a letter because I was kind of sick to my stomach when I felt that they may leave our area. I'm head of the neighborhood association, and we are so happy to have such good neighbors around. But I am also hearing all the wheelies or spins or whatever in the roads, and I'm like, I come down the street and I see all these black circles, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And there are, that the property, like she said, it's unusual that they're wanting that height of the fence, but what else? I thought that was the lesser of two evils, I would think, rather than getting involved with the people next door. They don't seem to want to listen to anything you have to say. And I'm not so sure that he doesn't own the house. And I'm not so sure that he really cares what's happening or not. I am disgusted by coming down that street and seeing all those cars parked back there. And I would think that, first of all, you'd have to have licenses for all those. I don't, and for the noise that they make. And I've called the police. There's people coming and going from there down one way on our past our house, and then they come down this way. So something else is going on in there. I am so happy to see that Beavercreek has a bed and breakfast. You know, nowadays you got all these fancy hotels and everything, but I lived in Beavercreek years ago, and I always found it wholesome, happy place. And now I'm sitting here in my front window watching these cars come down, these muscle cars, and down there. And it's like, Judas Priest, what? We left, we also went and lived in the inner city for 10 years. And we were getting away from that. We thought we'd try to be inner city people. And we were getting away from all that booming and the loud noises and everything. So it's very disrupting, and it's very, like I said, I'm so happy to have this bed and breakfast here, and I think the city should be happy to have it too, to bring more people into this area. And Beavercreek is, in my years of, I'm 76, in my years, has always been a wonderful place. Oh, you live in Beavercreek, you know, and I'm like, yeah. But now it's like, don't come this other way to our house, because I don't even want anybody seeing it. So, but I would hate to lose our neighbors, and like I said, I think it's the lesser two evils that they built this fence, because they are up higher and they see all this, and I would hate to think that we'd lose them and a bed and breakfast. So I hope you would consider that then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you everyone for providing us your feedback and your input to this public hearing. And at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up for board discussion. And I will start with Mr. Clunin.
Shocker. I have so many questions, and I don't know who to ask them to.
Start with Matt.
Yeah, Matt, since you're up there, you've volunteered essentially. I'm just going to rattle off a few of these, maybe the easier ones for you, Matt. What is this property zoned, the neighbor's property?
Agricultural.
Okay, same as the applicant's?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And do they have a license to operate a junkyard?
No, and that's some of the, I guess some of their statements weren't completely accurate. The applicant is not running a junkyard. And we do have the pictures that they showed aren't current pictures of the property. They're older pictures of the property. They didn't have dates on them, so I'm not sure exactly what the age of those pictures are. But we do have an open case on that, and staff has been working with the applicant to clean the property up, and there has been, there have been improvements to the property, and we've actually, the code enforcement officers checked registrations on some of those cars, and the cars that are there are licensed and operable, according to, what we have. I mean, obviously, we can't drive them, but they're certainly licensed, and I do have, maybe, if I can pull it up here. So basically, this is what the property looks like today. And basically, this is, from the road. This is what these pictures are from today. So this is what the property looks like in the back and basically from the road today. So, you don't see, a ton of junk vehicles. You don't see a ton of junk laying around. This is the picture, behind the house. I mean, there are some vehicles back there, but according to our code enforcement officer, he's checked the registrations on them. The registrations are current. And so we do have an open case on that, and we have been working with the property owner to get the property cleaned up. And, it is better, it is significantly better than it was back in July when we started our code enforcement case. So, there are, so it's certainly not considered a junkyard. And like I said, we do have an open case on this and basically, have issued a few violation notices, and basically, they're on notice that if it's not finished being cleaned up, that, we're going to basically prosecute them, because that's the end of, the end means of our code enforcement is prosecution. So, but they have been working on it to get things cleaned up. And so, it's not what you saw in some of their pictures. Not to say that it hadn't looked like that at some point, but it certainly doesn't look like that today.
What have the violation notices been for?
I don't have those with me right now, but I know it was for junk and debris and at one point junk vehicles as well. So a lot of that's been cleaned up. There is, in the one picture in the back, toward that white accessory structure in the rear, you see a pile of brush back there, but that was from, the winds a week ago. They had a tree or something or some limbs that came down in the front, and they piled it on their burn pile in the back to I guess, burn at some point.
Have there been any violation notices issued related to operating businesses that they might not have license to operate?
No. The main reason is because we've not been able to substantiate the fact they're actually operating a business there. According to the tenant, he has his own hobby cars that he works on with his buddies, and so we don't. That in itself is not a violation, but we've not been able to substantiate the fact of them actually operating a business from there, because you can have a home office. So even some of those things that they showed, that registrations that they showed that went back to that house, we have many people, landscapers, other things that operate businesses in Beavercreek, but their business, they operate a business, but their office is in their home, so all their business mail goes to their home. So and I can't criminally charge them for running a business if I can't prove that they're running a business. And at this point, we've not been able to substantiate the fact that they're actually running a business.
Appreciate it, Matt. I've got more for others, but I'll pass so I can. You guys don't. Okay, well, I'll be here all night.
That's right. We got on it.
Okay, I have that one written down. A question for the applicant, then, if you could, Mr. Stuck. I'll fire off some easy ones for you too, and hopefully some of these will be easy to answer. When was the fence built?
May of this year,
Okay.
within a span of about 4 weeks. I would say that's just a guess, but we hit it really hard.
Okay, and
Her and
who-
I. That's it.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, and who built it? Was it the two of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When did you guys move into the property?
April of 19, April of 20.
We purchased the property, it was in foreclosure in 2019 at an auction, and it took a year to rehab the house, so we moved in 2020.
And at that time, when you moved in, does the owner of the property, the neighbor, did they own this property at that point?
They did.
Okay. And was Mr. W last name?
Winsett.
Winsett, he was with another girlfriend. When we noticed things of violence and everything, but when she finally got fed up and left, he had another woman come in, and that's when things have escalated. The first girlfriend kind of reined him in, and now we're seeing more cars, the business. He had a failed business, and it was the coating.
The Buckeye Coatings.
Buckeye Coating, and he brought all the stuff to his place, so that's what he's running out of there now. He was just running Winsett Motorsports, which his former girlfriend, she applied for the LLC, and so then he went to Got V&M, and I believe that's in his name. And he was always running the business. And we have actually witnessed him getting paid, too.
Did, and you maybe described this, sorry if I ask again, but, so he was there when you guys moved
Yes,
in?
and there
Okay.
was nothing in the garage, nothing in that four-stall garage, nothing. I would go over to paint, and he had his doors up, and I'm like, he was just, sometimes would sit out there, and then several years later, that's when he started bringing stuff in.
Okay, and so about when would that be, I guess, that you saw an uptick?
22, 23.
Okay.
So if let me interject here. I think that Ms. Haskins
Yes,
bought that property in '23.
yes,
It's been
23.
Right.
over a year.
Yes, yeah, I remember seeing that. She
Okay.
bought it off of Danica Bassell.
Okay, and had she moved in before she bought the property? Ms. Haskins moved in before she bought the property, or about the same time?
Yes, before she
Trying
started.
to establish a timeline here, so.
Right,
Mr. Winsett's lived there since 2016.
yes.
Okay.
With Danica Bassell, and then she sold the property to Sandra Haskins
Got
at
it.
about 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Winsett's never been the owner of the property.
Just the resident. Okay,
He has no stake in what his behavior.
Yeah.
okay. Sorry for the
Nope,
interjection.
that's okay.
Probably
And
liberating.
the last question I have for now is, were either of you aware of any requirement to apply for a fence permit or the height restrictions in advance of this?
I take responsibility for that. I had a lady stop at my house. We had talked on the phone. She had called me about it being zoned for agriculture. So she was very happy for me, and I didn't know what that meant. So I looked it up, and it said that you did not need a permit for any structure. I took it that a fence was a structure, so I do apologize for that.
We have since paid for the permit, but it's kind of after the fact.
Yes.
But we wanted to
Yes.
make sure that we were,
And let me explain something, too, that we didn't really go into detail about. Between Mrs. Haskins' property and that white garage there, that it is 10 foot because of his cars that are there. We were getting woke up every night, so we thought putting a 10-foot fence in there, we didn't want it. We thought 8 foot would probably be better, but we thought it would mitigate some of the noise because it's unbelievably loud. I mean, I've been on the phone with my clients, and they'll say, "What is that?" And I'm like, "That's my neighbor." And they said, "I wouldn't tolerate that." I mean, it blows out our speakers. It literally blows them out. I have recordings if you want to hear it. I
You-
mean, on my phone, because I've taken it to an attorney.
And you would say that, I believe, Mr. Stuck, you said this when you testified, that the fence really has helped a lot.
Words can't define it. It's brought us a deep level of peace that we haven't been able to experience since we've moved in. We have granddaughters that play there, and we love them to experience the farm with us, and everything. And before we would catch our neighbor gawking at our oldest granddaughter, in my opinion, it enhances the beauty of that section of the neighborhood. It provides us, our guests, our neighbors with a level of peace that if you would have asked us before the fence, I wouldn't have been able to define. And I still can't define it. But it's just a level of peace that we have not been able to get through any other avenue that we've tried. And
No, that's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say, Mr. Funk you can probably see this in the records, how cyclical this is. They'll come out, he'll get in trouble, he'll do a little something, take a broom, clean something up, and it's a cycle. And then within a month or two, we're back at it. And in the meantime, we get harassed harassed because we called zoning on him, or we called the police on him.
So he has his friends
So he has
peel out.
his friends do it. He doesn't do it himself because I think he's still on probation or something silly. But so he actually can talk these people into doing
He gets kids over
ridiculous
to
stuff.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we knew something had gone down because all of a sudden, we're seeing them clean up. But it's funny because the way they clean up is they just hide it. So all this stuff behind, there's a little cabana in the back, it's piled, it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
piled full of stuff. He just hides it, then they go and they bring it right back, back. And
yep.
it's just over and over and over.
They just move it around the property. And
Yeah.
the one image we showed you where the tires were piled behind that cabana-style building that Matt spoke of, now it's got Bridgeport machines and, just all this junk that he collected from this failed business that was around the corner is piled back there, so you can't see it from the street. And the cars, whatever they've done, they've probably packed them in those
They're
garages.
stacked 3 deep, you can't tell,
But
but those cars are stacked 3 deep. And they're in the far side, right by the white garage, is the 2016 white Mustang that has expired tags. And I walked along before we built the fence, and I wrote down every one, and I sent it to the sheriff's department. And there were at least 4 expired tags in there. And I probably still have record of that.
But, within a month's time or 6 weeks,
It's
the
back.
heat will die off, it'll come back.
Yeah.
And so I just, it's cyclical. We know he's so predictable. And she has gotten a 5-star rating on the bed and breakfast thing. And
We
she
have
works
people
hard for that.
We have a guy coming from the UK to stay for 10 days. We have Venezuela.
Germany this summer.
Germany. We have
Folks-
Germany in the summer. And, we want to represent Beavercreek in the most positive fashion we can. And honestly, building that fence was the best thing we've ever done.
Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's all I have,
thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Piddle.
I do have a question for the applicants. What happens when you call the police or the sheriff's office?
When we've, as I said before, this is really escalating. And before it's like, oh, we're not going to call, because by the time the police come out, these little boyfriends of his will be long gone, right? But we were told by the police that I think it was when we started the neighborhood watch, call, no matter what. Whether it's after 11 because that's a noise ordinance. If it's before 11, call anyways. Sometimes people will be able to respond. So every time now we call, and sometimes they show up and sometimes we're not sure because we don't always ask. Like if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't just come over and tell them to stop. I don't want you to knock on my door and tell me that you told them to stop, you know. So we don't know that they respond every time, but they respond quite a bit, and they've really been helpful, quite honestly, here recently since we've gotten involved in the neighborhood watch. They seem to be responding well, and we've asked for additional patrols, and we've noticed that. But they can't always be there. And
we think he's got a scanner.
yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
We've seen him
yeah.
get off the car, literally walk on his deck and sit there.
Wait for the
So-
police to show up. That's happened.
He's a sneaky one.
Yeah, so,
I think that's my only question.
okay, thank you. I guess I'll just
Anything
stay up here.
for Mr. Funk, or just, that's it for now? You can have seconds.
Okay, I'll ask my question, Mr. Funk.
Okay.
So, how many times have we had violations out there?
I don't know what the exact count is, but, I mean, we were out there, the most recent complaint was in July. We'd gotten a complaint, and that's what we're working on now, to, get the property in compliance. Again, it's an ongoing process. And I understand, and, I mean, I think we had 2 complaints in 2023 and maybe 1 complaint in 2022. And if I recall, I guess it has been, somewhat cyclical in a way, but the thing is, at this point, moving forward, as we continue to, they're in violation, they either have to get it cleaned up or we're going to prosecute them. If they get it cleaned up, if they go back, we have a continuation within its time frame, a continuation of a violation within a certain time frame. If it's a year from now or 2 years from now, it might be somewhat limited. You almost have to start over in a little bit, but we do have the ability to, continue that violation, and basically, take them to court if we need to. Again, I guess the way we look at it is, you're talking about a permanent variance to a property for what could be a temporary, obviously, law enforcement's responding, we're taking action on our end. I mean, there's mechanisms to remedy this, to try to remedy this problem without a permanent variance to the property.
Mr. Funk, I understand that variances are permanent, but in this particular case, that fence certainly has a lifespan. And if that fence comes down, it will not be able to be replaced even with this variance. Is that correct, Counselor?
It would be non-compliant, and they would have to file for another variance again.
Thank you.
However, I need to make clear, there's case law that makes it very clear, past behavior of neighbors, past behavior of the applicants cannot be a consideration in determining whether you grant a variance. It has to be specifically related to the unique characteristics of the property, not the owners, not the neighbors. If Prince Harry moved in and the neighbors were with a paparazzi, he would not be allowed to build a 10-foot fence because they were snapping pictures of him every day. The clearest case that I've seen similar to this is Howard versus the city of Beavercreek, where the neighbor had post-traumatic stress disorder and felt that his neighbors were spying on him, and that was causing him to have heart problems and more post-traumatic stress disorder. And in that particular case, the district court and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the city of Beavercreek in denying the variance through a motion for summary judgment. In that particular case, he basically conceded his feelings didn't meet any of the Duncan requirements. He actually tried in that case to use the Fair Housing Amendments Act and say that it was a reasonable accommodation to grant the variance. And even with that extra step where he had a health issue, the courts said, no, there's no reasonable reason to grant the variance in that case. So once again, I just have you guys focus on the Duncan factors, which thankfully now are specifically outlined in the zoning code.
That's all my questions.
Which is part of the reason why I didn't focus on the neighbor feud too much in my presentation because, it's really about the property, the uniqueness of that property, as it pertains to their ability to build a compliant fence. So,
Mr. Esman?
So, this is very difficult in that it seems that there's a conflict between both property owners being able to have, quote, quiet enjoyment of their properties. This certainly seems to be a solution, especially since we received a letter supporting the first appeal from one of the affected people, I believe. That's my question about the permanence of the variance.
So
And-
that factor would go to factor number 3 under Duncan, which is the adjoining properties would suffer substantial detriment as a result of the variance. So
In this
I don't
case,
know
it's
what you
just-
guys are
in just-
thinking about.
In this case,
this-
it's just the opposite.
the horizontal bar, but you would say the adjoining property owner on that side at least doesn't think that this is causing a substantial, but that is obviously just one of the factors in the analysis, not the only factor. And you have to also consider that Mr. Winslow is not the only sex offender in the city of Beavercreek. He's also not the only person with a property no one wants to see. And if you grant a variance in this case, you have to imagine you're going to have to grant a variance in every case where someone wants to build a 10-foot, 8-foot fence because they dislike the way their property next door looks or they dislike the way the property owner is treating them. Once again, it is what about this particular property prevented them from having a compliant fence? Why weren't they able to do a compliant fence?
Thank you. I have nothing else.
Just a comment on that, Mr. Esman, for our law director, Josh. Wouldn't it be fair to say that none of the Duncan factors are dispositive towards, you don't have to prove all of them, right? One of them could weigh more heavily towards the other. And
There's no real, the case law, I would say you have to don't meet just one of them. But you definitely do not have to meet all of them to grant a variance. That's for certain.
Thank you.
Somewhere between 1 and 7, huh? Or in this case, 2 and 7.
we certainly, and we certainly deal with feuding neighbor situations all across the city.
Right.
And noise problems. Again, squealing tires on the road, a 10-foot fence is not going to alleviate that. There's a lot of these things that, are police matters or can be dealt with by other remedies outside of, building a 10-foot fence. And some of their concerns aren't going to be remedied by the 10-foot fence, like squealing tires on the road and things like that. So, but again, our concern is just the precedent that it sets. If you have a neighbor that's been convicted of a crime, is that going to, or do they just need to come to BZA and get a variance for an abnormally
Well, really,
tall
we have
fence?
2 violations here, one by the neighbor and one by these folks.
And both are being remedied. Both are being, we have
One's going to be
enforcement
remedied
cases
much
on
quicker
both.
than the other.
What's that?
One's going to be remedied much quicker than the other, I would suspect.
It's hard to say. I wouldn't necessarily say that.
That's all I have, thank
I
you.
mean, obviously, one's going to be remedied before the other, but
Okay. Mr. Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's like Judge Judy show TV. I have watched. You people have watched. That's what I am seeing now. I'm really emotionally touched by the way that applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Stuck, had to live with it for so long, and they approach our planning zoning, did not get any help. They approached police, sheriff, they got little bit help. And this is being a agriculture area. I have driven that road many times. And that particular place is very unsightly. I think whatever Mr. Stuck told, I agree with that. Whether old picture or new picture not any better than old one. And that they did not do it just for the pleasure. They did it because they could not take any more, and the zoning board, I hate to say, you people were not big help to them, and they had to take that action. And as Mrs. Tana said, that she was not aware of, or she got not a good information that she needed a permit to install, being in agriculture area, so they went ahead and did it. And nobody want to live with that kind of areas, with their grandchildren, and that young lady has 3 children, and you saw the emotional. That emotional itself, living in Beavercreek City, and people responsible not listening to them is not a good thing. So they came here to appeal because they couldn't get any help. So I also don't agree with our attorney, Duncan rule kind of thing, This board is a citizen appointed. It's not our job, we have other job. We are here to listen to common people in their face in their daily life, so we can come with an impartial opinion. And so that 6 feet fence is ideal for residential peaceful living. This is not a peaceful living area, and it does not bother anybody. And the people living in that area, they are here, and you can read their statement. So they are happy that somebody spent the money, and they are beneficiary of that environment. And so what I'm going to say is that whether the fence has a finished side, inside, a horizontal member, is immaterial, because it's not a polished area in his agriculture area, in sort of slash, And then that man has operating his business with tons of car and welding and during midnight and all kind and noise and fume and everything. Nobody has taken any action. The 4 year, 5 year, they have waited. So bottom line is, my sympathy goes with them, and I disagree with our attorney what his Duncan rule is, and then when my time will come, I will express my opinion.
The only comment I would say is, I would strongly disagree with your statement that the city's not done anything to help. We certainly have, and I think even the Stucks admitted the fact that when we've gotten complaints, we've dealt with the complaints in the past, just as we are doing now. So
But has not done. You are saying you still prosecuting. You're looking at the situation. You have a case pending, and when it's proven, then you'll prosecute. So nothing has been done so far. So they have waited 4 or 5 years, right?
A variance request is not the appropriate means for enforcement of zoning code violations by a neighbor. It's not to grant a variance. That is not a Duncan factor. You have to, if you disagree with the policy, go vote in new city council members. And in this case, you're going to have to elect different Supreme Court members, because this Duncan case has been around since 1986. So if you want the law to change, you're going to have to change the underlying law. You guys aren't responsible for making the law. You have to enforce the law as it is. So when you go through and make your decision, you have to go through every one of those factors and say met, not met, and why you think it's met or not met. And the zoning enforcement on a different property cannot be considered. Saying the sheriff's not helping, saying the city's not helping, saying those things is irrelevant. That is not a part of a zoning code of variance decision.
They are law-abiding citizens. They pay property tax. They want a protection, peaceful living, and if you are not able to provide, then it lies with somebody.
Sure, but I would also argue that, to the Stuck's admission, police have been more involved. The police involvement has increased the situation, I would say, especially here recently, has definitely been improved. The city's taken action from a code enforcement standpoint. The city's, obviously, law enforcement, is being, and their involvement has picked up. So again, there are other remedies to, absolve this other than just, just to grant the additional height on the fence.
What are the remedy? No, you have not suggested any remedy. They came to you for help. What kind of remedy have you suggested them?
Okay, but I would argue the pictures based upon what, the pictures from the past, obviously, the code enforcement case is essentially somewhat irrelevant to this case here, but, but if I had brought you pictures from when we were there to July to what it looks like now, you would see a significant difference in the property compared to July and now. So to say that we've not done anything, I would strongly disagree with.
And once again, the case law makes it very clear. You cannot make your decision based upon actions by a party, actions by a neighbor, future actions or past actions by the applicant. That is an irrelevant consideration. And if you base your decision on what's going on, what the behaviors are of neighbors, your decision will be overturned in a court of common pleas. It has to be based upon the Duncan factors.
But you have to remedy the situation.
That is not the purpose of a variance.
Okay. All right, so, Mr. Funk, before you sit down, I'm going to start asking my questions.
All right.
Help me understand what a shadow box fence is.
So shadow box fence is basically, we consider shadow box fence where the finished side is basically both sides are finished. And that's where you'll see the pickets are basically alternating on either side of the fence.
Oh, yeah.
So you'll see a picket and then a gap because the picket's on the other side of the, say, the 2x4.
Overlap, yeah.
And then it comes back to the other side. So they're alternating pickets on either side of that 2x4. Typically, it's a 2x4 on a fence. So they're alternating in space. So, you have a picket and then almost a picket's gap because the picket's on the other side and then back and forth down the fence. That's a shadow box fence.
Okay, that helps me understand.
Sure.
I have one in my backyard. It's not mine, but it's in my backyard.
Yeah. And we consider that, finished on both sides, essentially.
Okay, all right, great. Trying to think if I have anything else for you right now. I don't think so, but I'll avail myself of seconds later.
You're allowed
Sure
seconds.
thing.
Yeah, well, seconds. For the applicant, come on up. So, I'm not sure if it was our picture or your picture that showed the fence from your front yard that showed
That's our picture.
where the fence was.
Double fence. Yeah, their fence and your fence, the gap between.
That one
Yeah.
right there?
Yeah, that's a good one. So you talked about the grading of your lot, right? And that the reason that your 10-foot fence is effectively a 6-foot fence is because there's a 4-foot dip.
Yes, sir.
I don't see that here. Can you help me understand
I can
that
try.
visually?
Is this the thing that I'm supposed to shake and hold my left foot up in the air and?
Gradient.
Okay. The grading starts right here. And it goes just close to that pear tree, which that's a pear tree right there. So it's really tight up against our house. And it's how I assume they graded the building, the structure for the basement. So it dips down, and again, I'm kind of versed in topography maps through the military, and I could see that there was a 4-foot drop there. So and then on our deck, but at any rate, that's the deviation in the topography is really right there. Oh, there it is. It's kind of tight to the structure. It's right there. And it kind of flattens out and smooths out the further you get closer to Patterson.
Are we looking back to front or front to back here?
This is from front to back. Yes, sir. This is basically standing on Patterson Road.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So I saw us flip past the sketch. Can we go back to that for a second? Yep, right there. Okay, so at the end of your 240-foot length of the fence,
Yes, sir.
it looks like there's an 8-by-8-foot section that goes
Yes, sir.
left. Is that your property?
It is. And we had to include that chunk specifically for our guests.
Mike? You could talk to.
I thought you were saying Mike. My name's Steve. Oh, there you go. Okay, nice. So that chunk was specifically put in place for our guests because the bed and breakfast is right out off of the screen right there. And again, as I stated
Use the
before.
pointer to show me
Oh, gosh.
where the bed and breakfast would
Oh,
be.
yeah. So the front entry to the barn or to the bed and breakfast is it's up there. Perhaps maybe another foot. So,
Okay, I can see it now. Thank you.
yeah, the front entrance is on this end of the barn. It's right there, the entrance to our little cottage. And so as you can see, there was a direct line of sight. In fact, this is where the gunshots were or whatever when the poor lady that was out there by herself was wondering if they were shooting coyotes. And it was before that fence was up and, you know, all that.
Okay, so from other pictures I've seen, it looks like your fence sits on your property line.
Yes, sir.
Very close to it. So that 8-foot section that goes left, it looks like it goes off of your property line into looks like a farmer's field, right, out there.
I wish I could zoom in on this image here. It's the trajectory of the fence is on our property, of course, and it does this and then kind of kicks over to kind of because we wanted to maximize our space without encroaching on their property, but the 8-foot kick over there at the end is still on our property.
Okay.
It's hard for me to describe, and with this picture, I can't zoom in.
It's not a gate, you know, the one picture.
It's not a gate,
Yeah,
no, sir.
yeah, it's all the way.
It's
yeah.
just more protection from our guests, and I understand that, you know, this has been very traumatic for my wife and I and our neighbors, for that matter, and so forgive us for bringing some of that emotion and our troubles with the neighbor. That wasn't the intent. Our intent is really to keep our fence for our peace of mind and the peace of mind of the folks that we try to share our property with.
Okay.
So I wanted to say that.
Okay, so before you sit down, 'cause I have another couple of questions for Mr. Funk. The videos that you provided us, watched them all.
Thank you. I thought
Some of them look like they're repeats, but
there's lots of them.
I did not see any timestamps on those.
You know, that's a good question. You weren't here when I was trying to work the technology in here, but I think when I transferred those from our Blink cameras that we record a lot of that stuff from, or from our phones, somehow that data was not transferred with it. It was the stamp of when the transfer was made, not when the video was actually made. I don't know how to do that. I understand your question, and yeah, that's my only reason, or that's my only answer.
Okay, so, I mean, it looks like you've got a lot of video going, you know, from over time, day and night. Have you provided any of that video to law enforcement?
Yes, sir. The sheriff's department, we provided it to them because we wanted them to look into the vehicles. We weren't getting much of a response from the Beavercreek police. So we thought, well, let's take it to the sheriff. Perhaps that's more in their jurisdiction. And it was about 4 months later, we provided all this information to them.
Okay.
And they came back a long time, 4 months at least, and said, we don't have anything. This provides us nothing, or we couldn't find anything on that.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I have some experience with recorded video footage from cameras, security cameras. And if you download from the recording device to a USB stick, right, or a flash drive, and then provide that, it's different than what you provided to us with the download of the documents. And I would just suggest that if you're not providing that to law enforcement on a flash drive, that you do that.
We did to the sheriff's, and
Because with a
didn't
timestamp,
we
they
give
should
that
be
to
able
you
to.
on a thumb drive as well? Oh, okay.
No, we got it in a Dropbox file, right?
We put it on an online thing so they could all see it.
I got you.
Right.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
It really has nothing to do with your variance, but just
Yes.
as a suggestion.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Funk, again. Can we go back to a picture of from the front of the house, or from Patterson? Yeah, there. So, if I understand correctly, I don't think it was really called out in this complaint that both of their fences are in violation of the front yard. Is that correct?
That's not correct. Basically, because Patterson Road is at an angle, when you look at, basically, the privacy fence has to be outside the required front yard. So that required front yard would be that line where it says East Patterson Road, from that point back 40 feet. So the applicant's fence is actually outside that required front yard.
Okay.
So you can extend a fence forward, it just can't be in the required front yard. And we made the determination based upon the information that they provided and some measurements and stuff that the fence is likely right at that line, but just outside right at the required front yard limit. So yes, technically their fence is in front of their house, but it is, because the road is at an angle,
Okay.
it is outside the required front yard.
Okay. And I think my last question, before seconds, is you had made mention that there were potentially other methods of, or other options available. Can you talk to those?
As far as the orientation of the fence, certainly, we have examples where, you can buy, most of you guys have seen like a vinyl fence where they hang the vinyl fence in between the 4-inch posts. Basically, you can do the same thing with a privacy fence. And we have that, that's not uncommon. I mean, we see it here and there when you have basically for example, a privacy fence going up against a chain link fence and the neighbor doesn't want to take down their chain link fence. They basically, you hang brackets and then you can basically, you put the 2x4s and the pickets on you hang those 2x4s on brackets in between the 4x4 posts. And you can actually, we have contractors that have constructed those. We've had guys that basically put the 2x4s up, nail the pickets to it, pick it up, flip it around, and then set it back in place with the finished side facing the outside or the horizontal inside. So, there's certainly different types of construction that allow those horizontal supports to be facing the inside of the fence. I think that's probably why, we probably haven't really had any variance requests for people, requesting that the fence be allowed to be flipped around, because there are certainly, it's possible, if, to construct a fence that way, even a 6 foot, or 6 foot wood board fence.
Okay, and is there any requirement for a fence to be so far off of a property line?
No, they can build up to the property line. And to digress slightly on the terrain part, We understand that, if you look at the topo there, that they're pretty much on the same grade, again, going diagonally with the neighbor's house. And not to say that, up around the house there isn't maybe somewhat of a downturn, but again, terrain in Beavercreek, if you live in Terra and there's numerous, we've have houses that are, largely, significantly higher than the neighbors' houses. And again, they're still required, we're not, nobody's asking for a 20-foot privacy fence because their neighbor's house is 15 feet above theirs.
Right.
So, terrain is certainly not unique to Beavercreek as far as, topography. We have some pretty extreme topographical areas.
Sure. Seconds?
I have that. Okay, no, go.
I'll just ask a quick one, maybe for
Yeah,
Matt
no,
while he's standing up there. And I want to say too that maybe after we're done asking seconds, this probably is a good one to have discussion on too, just at least talking about some of these factors, because I think the Duncan factors are important along with everything we've talked about. But to that note, Matt, factor number 7 here is whether the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting the variance. What would staff say is the spirit and intent behind having a 6-foot fence requirement?
Basically, the 6-foot height limit, was established by council as, the max height for any zoning district. So, the intent was, I assume the intent, that was passed years ago. That predates any of us. But I assume it's to afford, a certain level of privacy. But again, a privacy, 6-foot woodboard fence, there's no inherent, privacy to what some people call a privacy fence, because if you're 8 feet tall, you're looking over. If a 7-foot person can easily look over them. But that's what we, the city, like many other communities around us, set as a standard as far as maximum height. So the intent was to maintain that height. It's uniform across, pretty much all of our zoning districts. So to exceed that would be, certainly unprecedented.
The intent of almost all zoning code regulations is uniformity. Uniformity across so you don't have one house with an 8-foot fence, one, and then everyone else with 4 and one with 6. It's to any, like, setbacks, everything's about
Yeah,
uniformity.
but you can do that now, and you can put up a 4-foot chain link fence and also have a 6-foot privacy fence. So I don't see where you necessarily have uniformity there.
And once again, we're talking about maximums here. So if we're talking about minimum setbacks, you want at least them that far back. If you're setting maximum for fence, you want the height to be no taller than that. That's the uniformity you're looking for. The limitations. So setbacks, there's limitations. Height of fences, there's limitations. Size of
I can
structures,
see limitations,
there's limitations.
but I can't necessarily see your uniformity argument, Councilman.
And once again, it's to the maximums. Uniformity on maximums.
I would venture to say that 6 foot is probably pretty standard to any community around us, including the township. As far as that max height, I don't know. The only exception would be around a tennis court. I think is the only exception we have in our code. Would be a taller fence around a tennis court. But outside of that, I think we're pretty consistent with any other community around us to maintain that max height of 6 feet.
Did I understand, though, 8 feet around the business?
No, it's 6 feet. In industrial districts, you can have a security fence. You can have a security fence that goes to 8 feet in an industrial district. But you're talking about, more intensive uses for sure.
And you just commented on this tennis court thing. If they put tennis courts all along their property line, that would be acceptable?
You just need a net and,
Just need a net
lines.
and some lines, right?
Right, yeah.
You'd have to, as long as they, I guess in theory, I don't know that they potentially, potentially they could, as long as they met our, obviously you can't have a chain link fence in the front yard, so they would certainly have to look at materials and stuff, but I guess in theory, I guess you could somewhat do that as long as it was a legitimate I guess if they want to start a tennis complex and put it in their yard on their property, as long as they met our zoning requirements, I guess they could do that.
All right,
Seems
that's,
pretty extreme measures.
So,
Yeah.
but seriously, but
Might
on that
work.
topic, does the tennis court requirement, is the tennis court requirement for a chain link fence? Or is it just, you can have a fence up at 10 feet to enclose a
The
tennis court?
ball,
Yeah, it would be to enclose a tennis court.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. Great minds think alike.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
no,
Okay,
that's all I have on that, yeah. thanks.
Norm?
Just another quick one. In the agricultural district that, for the houses, is a B&B permitted?
They did get a license for the Airbnb back in 2023.
Okay, is an automotive repair garage permitted?
No.
Thank you.
Not sure
We
what
can't,
Robin's-
we can't substantiate the fact that there is an automotive repair shop being operated. So had we been able to substantiate that, we'd certainly would be going after them for that.
Well, according to the neighbors, that happens when your zoning inspectors are off work.
Again, for me to substantiate that in court is something completely, hearsay from a neighbor and criminally prosecuting someone in court over those facts are two completely different things.
I kind of agree with Mr. Esmond, but help us understand what kind of evidence you would need if it's not a code enforcement officer who's actually observing that. I mean, would one of their videos was timestamped showing work activity on vehicles?
Part of the neighbors, again, I'm not sure why I guess you guys are certainly sensitive to the emotional part of this, but, as far as going to the code enforcement part of this, we have people that do hobby car repair in their garages, their own garages all the time, which is what he claims he's doing, is repairing his own cars. He has hobby cars that he works on, things like that. His buddies do, and they come over and they hang out and drink beer and work on their cars. That happens in the city of Beavercreek. I mean, that happens all over the city of Beavercreek, where people hobby work on their cars. We have race car guys in town. We have all kinds of automotive guys that rev their engines, and so that's not that in itself is not necessarily unique to this property. Again,
Sort of unique to have 4 sets of neighbors show up to complain as well.
Well, and you're right, it's not germane to the variance request, except that if, there are 2 issues here. One of them is under our purview, the other one is not, right? And, but I think it would be cavalier for us to disregard that, and not try to help resolve that problem, right? And help you resolve that problem.
the city's certainly already working to resolve that problem.
I know you are, but it sounds like that the neighbor is hiding things, moving things around so that when you show up, right, that it looks like it's been improved. But again, this is all speculation, right?
But we have,
It's-
we certainly have the ability to inspect their property,
Yeah.
They might move some things. I'm not going to say that they hadn't moved some things around at times, but we do have the ability to inspect their property to ensure compliance, and we certainly are in the process of doing that.
Okay.
And there have been, obviously, we're not, if I didn't necessarily foresee that this variance case would be, more about a code enforcement case than actually about the variance. Had that been the case, I certainly would have come with before and after pictures and all that kind of stuff to demonstrate to the board that the city's working on the, remedying the problem.
Right.
Which, again, is part of the thing. We have an active code enforcement case. The property, from July to now, there is a significant improvement to the property. Again, our focus was on the variance, not necessarily a code enforcement case. I feel like we're
Agreed,
hearing,
it should
I
be.
guess
hearing a code enforcement
The
case.
the
than
trouble
just-
I'm having at this point and it's obviously, or maybe it's not so obviously, which could be quite out of our purview, is trying to make sure that both parties get quiet enjoyment of their property. And the applicant has actually come up with a solution for both properties, and sort of agree on that except for maybe the horizontal bars, where they both can enjoy their property and use it the way they'd like to, and yet we're being asked to say, okay, no, you can't do that because there's a variance, we don't meet the variance guidelines necessarily, but you guys have solved the problem, so we're going to unsolve the problem for you. That's the problem I'm having at this point, and it's a difficult
Well, I guess the
thing
thing
for
to
me
take
to
into
deal
consideration
with.
is the city's already working to solve the problem, and they have remedies like the use of law enforcement. If they're burning illegally, they can contact the fire department. We already have a zoning case. I mean, we're also talking about, and we're certainly empathetic to and we're not trying to negate their concerns with the neighbor. We certainly empathize with that, and we're, taking action to help them correct that, as I'm sure law enforcement is too, to the best of their ability, try to help them absolve whatever concerns they have as far as noise and different things. But they're also, we have to also, from our perspective, we also have an applicant that constructed an illegal fence and is trying to justify the use of their illegal fence.
Right.
The maintenance of that, keeping that illegal fence. So, and again, not to negate their concerns, we certainly understand their emotional, their emotional appeals and all that kind of stuff. But they also have, an illegal 10-foot fence, an 8-foot fence that they constructed without a permit that they're trying to justify keeping because they want it.
Once again, the case law makes it clear, behavior of the applicant, behavior of the neighbors, that's not a consideration. You have to look at the property itself, their property. What's unique about their property that made it impossible for them to build a compliant fence? Was it not possible to build a compliant fence because there was a stream running through there? Was it not possible to build a compliant fence because the topography had a cliff there? So, something
We have a 4-foot
geographically,
cliff
like topography.
Right.
Most of the time, it's just the last BZA case involved the city taking so much of a person's front yard that they couldn't get out of their driveway unless we granted a variance.
Right.
We had a property where they couldn't build a house on a residentially
substandard lot.
zoned lot because the setback requirement. So the only way they could enjoy the property was that. So it was what's about their property that prevented them from complying.
Okay, I think we've killed this horse. Do you need?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that we are still stuck with our compliance and not coming up with a solution because the next door, his style is not changed, maybe someday better than the other time, but it's not a hobby, as you mentioned, happen in Beavercreek City. People have a hobby shop, people come, but they have no right to make that neighborhood nasty or next door nasty, They have no right to disturb other people. In this case, different situation. They have a group of people come, welding, making noise, and this is not a peaceful living. So this is unlike other thing you're talking about, other part of the city. This is a different situation. Now, having this situation, and you say that things are still under consideration. So could we table this one, not do anything until you have resolved the issue? That means that the next door who's creating the problem, bring them to compliance the way it should be, and then they can go back and maybe trim the fence to bring to 6 feet, if things get better. That's what you want, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's, the compliance of the neighbor's ability to comply really shouldn't have any bearing on the variance for this neighbor.
Because
the neighbor is not giving opportunity to next door to live peacefully. If he's a garage, different vehicles and welding and and in odd hour, he's still working on it, and that makes the neighbor uneasy, cannot sleep. So that is a going into some other territory. They have no right to disturb. So what I'm saying, because that lifestyle of this next door has not changed yet, and you're still looking into that. Once the lifestyle get normal, or those gentlemen, they are happy, they see everything is normal now, then they can go back and and apply the permit again or whatever, and bring the fence to 6 feet at some point.
The
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
the status of that code enforcement is irrelevant to whether a variance is granted or not, so it would be an improper reason to table the issue.
Right.
It will have no effect on, it should have no effect on your guys' decision tonight.
Right.
And we're actively working to remedy the violations. So, you know, we're actively working to resolve those. I mean, so, you know, I don't, again.
Until then, what they should do until then, when you're still resolving the issue, right? Until then, what happened?
They continue to call, you know, again, we have disturbing the peace all over the city. I mean, I don't know how many disturbing the peace calls the law enforcement get every month, but, I mean, again, you know, unless you guys are gonna, in the process of, you know, everyone that comes through this board saying, I don't like my neighbor, we're fighting, and they get on my nerves and they yell at me, so I'm gonna build an 8-foot fence. I mean, you're
But this is not
circumventing
normal.
the
This is
zone.
not normal case. It's not normal situation. That you heard that.
From my
people-
perspective,
Yeah, it's not normal.
who deals with code enforcement, we deal with feuding neighbors all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not, you know, do they all get to this level? No, but we deal with feuding neighbors all the time. We deal with neighbors that hate each other all the time.
And this is
That in
very
itself is
similar.
not justification for a variance.
This is very similar to that Howard versus the city of Beavercreek case, where he thought his neighbors were spying on him, which was aggravating a heart condition and post-traumatic stress disorder, not a factor in determining whether the variance should be granted or not.
Right. Okay. I think we have beaten this horse multiple times. I will entertain a motion. Well, can I entertain a motion to either approve or disapprove? Let me back up. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. We have two variance requests here, basically. And I'd like to do the variance for the height of the fence first, and then we'll do a vote for the
Horizontal member.
yeah, the orientation of the fence second.
Well,
You
one
should
will make the
also-
other one new.
You should also make findings of fact before you pass, or whatever motion you make, go through the Duncan factors, please, just so that there's a record as to what the basis was of the decision, one way or the other. I'm not saying, I'm not directing you one way.
That has not been our normal procedure.
Yeah,
Um,
not procedure. Yeah,
That's the appropriate procedure.
That's not a procedure.
And it-
Well, we have not been appropriate for years.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, I don't know even how I would affect that.
All right.
You go through in each factor and
You're
ask
not
the
allowed.
question.
For each board member?
You can go through each board member and ask whether they find if it's met or not, yes.
No, we are not lawyer.
You're sitting as the Board
I
of
know,
Zoning
but
Appeals, you have to make a
we
decision.
are representing of the city.
I
then.
will reluctantly make a motion based upon the Duncan factors outlined. I find that criteria number 1 is not satisfied. Find criteria number 2 is not satisfied. I find that criteria number 3 is satisfied. Find that criteria number 4 is satisfied. Criteria number 5 is not satisfied. Criteria number 6 is not within our purview, is therefore not satisfied. And number 7 is satisfied. Therefore, based upon the criteria, I move that we deny the variance. I'm very reluctantly.
For the For the height of the fence?
For the height of the fence, yes, sir.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and that is to deny the height requirement variance request. Ms. Gilall, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clunin,
How do we vote on this, Melissa? Based on
Yes,
what Norm says?
yes would be,
Just to support
So
yours?
Yeah, sorry. For Robert's Rules of Order,
Yeah.
everything should be done in the affirmative, even if you want something denied. So you would say, I vote to approve the variance, and then there would be a second, but then that could be unanimously, everyone votes no. That's why it's confusing. If you make a motion in
we're
the
not going to
negative,
have,
Yeah.
I
You made
vote
the
to
motion.
deny, and then
He
you
wants to
say,
make sure he's gonna
yay,
answer the
yay,
right
yay.
Yeah, I want to make sure I say,
I vote to deny the variance based upon the factors that I outlined.
So if it's made that way, you would still, a yay
Yes.
would be to deny. That's why it's confusing to do it in the negative.
Okay.
But if
So
that's
I'm
the way
gonna
the motion is,
say-
that's the way the motion is.
with the clarification, make sure I get it right, that I vote nay to what Norm moved for.
So you
Okay.
want to support the variance.
Correct. And I'd be happy to do the Duncan analysis when it gets that, if it needed to, but, you know.
Mr.
Okay.
Essman,
I vote to deny the variance.
Ms. Piddle,
I vote deny.
Mr. Botla,
I support the variance.
Mr. Archibald,
I deny. I vote to deny. So that the variance request for the height of the fence has been denied on a vote of 3-2. Let's go through the same process of, Norm, since you did such a fine job on the Duncan stuff, why don't we do that for the,
Oh, boy, okay. So, Counselor, help me out how to make an affirmative motion here.
You can go through the Duncan factors and say, I think that it meets this, doesn't meet that, doesn't meet this, and because of those reasons, I vote. I don't believe that it should be approved. And you would go through the factors, say that it's not part of the motion. You go through, these are the factors, so I don't think it should be. First, there needs to be a motion to approve. If there's not even a motion to approve the variance.
We did, that's what I did. We did.
So,
Do
yeah,
that for the first one, but
That's
not
what
the
he did.
second one.
so just go through the findings of fact and then make your motion. You don't have to be, I move that we've met this requirement, and this requirement. Say, I don't think they've met these, but I think they've met these. Based upon that, I'm making a motion to deny, or I'm making a motion to affirm. That's the way I think we handled the last one, so let's do it that way this time.
okay?
Going to make a motion at
Just go-
some,
just go through the
at
factors.
some point in time, based upon these Duncan factors,
Perfect.
that says, the first criteria is not satisfied. The second criteria is not satisfied. The third criteria is satisfied. The fourth criteria is satisfied. Fifth criteria is not satisfied. The sixth criteria is not satisfied. The seventh criteria is not satisfied. Based upon these findings,
Make a motion.
I will move to deny the variance.
That works.
Okay?
And the second.
The second variance,
Right.
or the
Supported-
supporting structure.
There you go. That's the term I was looking for, supporting
Supporting
structure.
structure, no, second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to deny the variance request for the supporting structures. Do I hear a second?
I'd second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Gill, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Essman,
Yay.
Ms. Biddle,
Yes.
Mr. Botla,
Yes.
Mr. Clunin,
Yes.
Mr. Archibald.
Yes. Okay, so the second part of the variance request has also been disapproved. I don't think that this, well, this, I know that this does not mean you can't have a fence, but you can't have this fence, right? It has to be within the 6-foot height limit, and the horizontal supporting structures need to be on the inside. Okay. I don't see that we have anything else on the agenda.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn and a second. By voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. We are in fact adjourned.